Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast. We're the podcast that talks about gacha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. This week, we've got a fun topic. I'm going to be leading in on it, but I am your host, Steven, and this is my co-host, Dave.
Hey everyone.
And as you can tell, I'm really raring to get onto my soapbox on this one, and we're going to be discussing exploration as content. So just to set some ground rules and some borders on the conversation to help try and keep us from going out on bunny trails. It's going to happen, but try and pin us in a little bit. When I'm talking about, or when we're talking about exploration, we're talking about the overworld portion of Genshin Impact and to a lesser degree Honkai. The sort of running around the map, the collectathon type objectives, to a lesser degree the puzzles, not so much the puzzle activity itself, but the presence of those small puzzles, small activities that you would do on the map. We're being a little bit general with exploration, but that's where we're going to be leading into this. Dave, really quick, I am going to pass the ball over to you real quick. Do you have any thoughts on exploration as a type of gameplay in video games in general? Outside of Genshin, do you have any preference or any driving desire to play games that are about exploration?
Yeah, so great question. And for me, as far as games go, sticking with Genshin specifically right now, and then I'll expand on it. So part of the draw to me to Genshin was this massive open world to explore. And for me, in terms of game style and things I like to do, I'm a completionist. Back when I played WoW, I was an achievement whore, so I was always trying to do things to get achievements, and a lot of those maybe involved exploration or whatever have you, and grinding reputations, whatever it was. And I'm that type of person where I will explore a map to remove all the fog of war and explore 100% of the map. For me, I enjoy that type of content. Now, there is a threshold that it can ultimately get to be too much, or if I get into games that are so massive that you literally can't do everything in one playthrough, sometimes that can be a little frustrating. But if it's a good game, I don't mind replaying it. So a prime example of that would be something like Baldur's Gate 3, which is massive game, a lot of quests, a lot of different outcomes for those quests and explorations going off the beaten path. And it's a game that I wouldn't mind replaying, don't mind replaying, because it's so well done and there's all these different outcomes that can occur, and every playthrough is unique based off of decisions you make. Now, if I'm doing co-op with friends, sometimes I can drive them a little nuts because I will intentionally go away from an objective because I want to explore off the beaten path to find that last little hidden chest or whatever it is. But that's me as a gamer, and as far as my part of my appeal to Genshin was the exploration in this massive, beautiful world, exploring that, finding the chests, doing a lot of the little puzzles. Some mechanics I like more than others. Finding the Dendroculus for the Statues of the Seven in Mondstadt when that came out, right? And as a completionist, I also do appreciate the zooming out on the world map, giving us a percentage of everything that we've found in the region. And looking at my map, it really tells a story of my time in Genshin and what was going on in my life when I was busy, because those regions maybe aren't as explored as much as others. Like Mondstadt, I basically 100%ed everything, but Sumeru was a very busy time in my life. I'm probably about like 50 to 60% there. But how about yourself? I'll toss it back over to you. What are your thoughts? I know I'm prepping the soapbox for you. Here you go.
I like it. I like exploration. It is an aspect of gaming that I want to see in a lot of games, especially ones that are aiming for atmosphere. Here I'm thinking of things like Bethesda games, a lot of the more immersive sim type games, so your Deus Ex, BioShock, etc., etc. Yeah,
And real quick for
mhm.
for those unfamiliar with Bethesda, that would be the Elder Scrolls series. So like Morrowind, Skyrim, and Oblivion.
Yeah, or the once they took over Fallout, so Fallout 3, 4, New Vegas, etc. So those style games, I do enjoy exploration, which is the caveat that I need to put down before the rest of what's about to come over the course of this
Oh,
podcast. Is that I do enjoy it. I really do. I 100%ed Inazuma. I have thoughts on why I did that versus other regions, but I do enjoy exploration. I do think, and I guess here I'm going to flop out the thesis statement that I have on this episode. I do think that exploration as a focus for Genshin is a bad move overall by Hoyoverse. I think the juice isn't worth the squeeze in regards to development time, and I'm not super pleased with the direction that they've taken exploration, especially in the last two regions. I think Inazuma and to a lesser degree Liyue and Mondstadt were better designed for exploration than the later sections that we're getting to. And I will defend those arguments, but in classic essay writing format, I need to put my thesis out there first.
Your
Yeah,
introductory paragraph, and then you'll defend each thing in the following, right?
exactly. So, David, you mentioned that you 100% did Mondstadt. You're probably close to that on Leeway, excluding the chasm and the more recent sections of that portion of the map. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, so for my Mondstadt, everything is 95% or better, with multiple regions being 100. Liwa, I think is, yeah, similar, like 98%, 98%. Inazuma, everything is 100% except for Watatsumi Island. So I still have a little work to do there. But yeah, and then the chasm is 54% if I'm looking at it right now.
Okay. That's fairly similar to where I'm at as well on those. And I think, personally, that part of the reason why those earlier areas are so well explored by us is A, we were a little bit more hype. Also, we had a little bit more time at the time to take care of those zones, to really dig in and really explore them. But I do think that they were a lot more manageable. The more recent zones that have come out have been very large. Sumeru is a very large region. Fontaine is a multi level, large region. And I don't want to, again, be overly critical of Hoyoverse on this. I think they're putting in a lot of work. I think they're putting in a lot of care into these zones. But Mondstadt was manageable to 90%, 100% of those zones. Inazuma, when it came out, we were getting island by island, and those were all small pocket zones that you could really focus in on, really go in and really grab everything. It's also worth noting that Inazuma is when they started adding the trees, where you had to collect the seals of the region.
Oh, yeah, the little coin-like things. Right?
Yeah, they're. I think they are called seals. I might be wrong, but like little wax seals, not like animal seals. You had to collect those, and then you would turn them in and
Sigils.
sigils. Thank you.
Or if you're Matt Mercer, Sigils. Anyway, a little critical role humor for you. Anyway, go ahead.
No, you're good. So you have to collect the sigils and turn them in for rewards, and that really drove my desire to explore Inazuma. But when we hit Sumeru, the area was so large, it was so difficult to do a sort of grid or really focused deep dive into each zone in order to get the sigils you needed, in order to grow the tree, etc., that it was just a pain in the butt. It also doesn't help that I think a lot of the later puzzles that have come out have hit a point where they're just not quite, they're not hitting for me the same way that a lot of the earlier puzzles were, because the other earlier ones were very basic, but that was to their advantage. You could roll up on one of the totems that you had to hit with an element, and that's a fairly understandable interaction. Now you're running up onto stuff, and I'm going to use Fontaine as example. A lot of the underwater ones aren't necessarily super complex, but there's a lot more, I feel, where you're having to go on mini quest chains in order to unlock stuff, or you're running into odd esoteric interactions within the exploration system, within the puzzle system, and it's just, I'm not jiving with it. It's not working for me. And I keep on looking at that sort of content and going, I kind of wish, and I know it's not coming. I really do. I don't want to toot this horn too much, but why are we getting this sort of content instead of, say, something else other than the Abyss to do as repeatable content? Just some other game mode?
So you're looking at those earlier puzzles maybe as being more intuitive, whereas these other ones, while like you said, yeah, not difficult per se, you are having to read the screen tutorials to be like, okay, what am I supposed to do here? Because it's not like
Yeah.
self-explanatory. Is that kind of
Uh,
what you're saying? A little bit?
Correct. They're not as self explanatory, or even if you do read the tutorials, a lot of times if you don't immediately if that coin doesn't drop for you the first time you run into it, the second time or the third time you're going to be running around and going, okay, what's going on? For example, the kelp that is underwater in Fontaine, where you need to get the Stingray's special power that shoots the blade in order to pop the kelp or break the kelp. A lot of times, I ran into a number of those where I really didn't understand what was going on because the guide told me that, oh, you have to hit the little glowing thing in order to break it. Now the glowing thing is moving, and it's okay, fine, whatever. So you hit it, and then it doesn't pop. No, you had to wait until all of the glowing things are in a line and hit them all at once in order to break out of it. And there's no real feedback in the game telling you that's what the problem is, other than you do it and then nothing happens. That's a specific example of a general problem that I don't feel like you get as much feedback in a lot of the newer puzzles. A lot of the new, just a lot of the new regions aren't hitting for me. Is the root of the problem, but I'm really left going. Maybe development time should be spent on other stuff. I guess I'll get your thoughts and then I'll continue on with some other segues and some other points that I do want to bring up.
Yeah, so you bring up good points, I think, in terms of the complexity of the puzzles. I've seen that as well. And again, we're not saying that the puzzles are difficult or hard per se, but relatively speaking to the puzzles you were doing in Mondstadt, where yeah, it was use this element on this totem or use this element on these four totems within a certain time frame, or even like within Azuma puzzles like spin, hit the blocks with electro to rotate them all to face the same way type stuff. Those types of puzzles were yeah more straightforward and while still a small challenge, right? Yeah, to your point, yeah, with the kelp, or the other one that I've seen is oh pop all of these little floaty orange balls underwater, but you only have two throws to do it in, and the hit markers aren't always spread out for you as far laid out for you as far as okay, what's the range on this? Well, that looked like it hit that orange bubble, but it didn't actually pop that orange bubble. What are we doing here? And then it's also almost like I have to go refer to a video guide just to see how they line up the shot in order to hit it. So I see where you're coming from there. I think another thing in terms of why maybe these newer zones aren't resonating as much, and you can maybe correct me if this isn't your thoughts, but for me, I can see that traversing the actual terrain is maybe a little bit more difficult, or because whether you're climbing a taller mountain in when we were out in the desert in Sumeru,
Mhm.
or being yeah underwater and swimming for a while, and that depletes the stamina, and also like the different levels. Like this maybe what with Sumeru was a little bit frustrating for me is this thing on the surface level? Is it on the first floor of the under the sand dungeon, or is it on the second floor under type thing? And so that back and forth running around, and I really didn't like the invisible wall ones in Sumeru either, and those puzzles. Now something else too that I think maybe contributes to this is in the earlier zones when it came to those puzzles, there weren't there wasn't an item that you needed to trigger the puzzle, or there wasn't a world quest that you had to do necessarily to get access to something like this. There were a few times, and I really started noticing it in Sumeru, where I would come up to the puzzle and it's like, you don't have the clearance to do this puzzle, or you don't have the required materials. There was like the ones with where you need the gin bottle. If you haven't done that world quest, if you haven't found that world quest, you don't have that gin bottle to do that world puzzle. And so then that kind of, hey, you can't do it what you have it, and then I got to go find how to get that gin bottle. But then if you come across that puzzle and you're doing something else, God, this is another one I've missed type thing, and that can maybe discourage a player from doing that perhaps because oh, I got to come back to this place rather than just having instant access to be able to do it if I've stumbled upon it. Because if you're going to have exploration as content, which Genshin very much does, and I agree with you, there's a lot of care put in to the world that they've built and allowing us to explore. But if you're going to have that exploration component, don't restrict our access to the puzzles that we stumble upon, because that's so much about what exploration is. What did I stumble upon? Can I do it? Yes, awesome. No, I'm restricted because of reasons XYZ. then why are you letting me explore this area if I don't have the necessary things to unlock it?
You know what? Perfect. You hit on basically exactly what my next topic was going to be, which was multi levels and the gated quests, the gated content behind quests.
Not planned, by the way. I have not
Yep.
seen Steve's notes. That was not planned.
No, but yeah, those are exactly what I was going to bring up. And I really do agree as well that Sumeru was, I think, where a lot of these issues started to come to a head. I do want to point out, though, that in Inazuma, these issues existed. However, I do feel that it wasn't technically instanced, but the fact that the exploration and the quests and so forth were tied to each island made it much more manageable. You didn't. I think one of the issues with Sumeru and Fontaine is that there's no break. There's no physical delineation saying, hey, this area, this zone is its own thing. You don't walk into it and then be given a quest to help a ghost boy find his Thunder Eagle Thunderbird friend and go through that quest chain, and then once you finish that up you're like, oh hey, that unlocked all of the little minor exploration things. But that feels a lot more natural than wandering around a vast rainforest and just not being able to do something because you haven't lowered the water in that area yet, because you haven't done a quest for a little seed guy, a little
Oh,
plant
the
person.
on our
Yeah,
things or whatever. Yeah.
exactly.
So yeah, and there was an instance in Azuma. It was at Kumo Peak, that big lake that you're supposed to drain, that you're supposed to de-electrify or whatever it was. And to your point, those things existed in Azuma, but the access to be able to do that thing, it was all there for you to do. You didn't have to go to a completely separate island and then double back after completing a world quest on another island with an item in order to do that. The puzzles were all around the border of that lake that you could accomplish if you stumbled upon it, which most people did. Or maybe win another world quest that's in that zone and you stumble across this puzzle and you can do it. But yeah, to your point, in Sumer, yeah, it's like, oh, I haven't done this world quest and gotten the little harp thing or whatever from the Nara, and so I can't play the equivalent of my ocarina, right? I can't play
Mm-hmm.
Zelda's Lullaby at this tree to unlock the portal to the on Anara world or whatever to do this puzzle or affect the region in this regards.
Yeah, and so much is gated behind that Inara quest, or in the desert, so much is gated behind the Jin quest. These sort of zone quests, to the point where I really do feel that they should have been made mainline story quests. They should have been like Archon quests, or at least flagged in the same way. That again, whenever you hit the islands in Inazuma, those were patches. Those islands were entire patches of content. You were told, hey, go here, do this quest. And then once you completed it, you basically had the run of the zone. And there wasn't anything really holding you back. You've unlocked everything you needed. You could do the Thunderbird statue, like the little Thunderbirds on, can't remember the island. I want to say it's like Wakakomi or something like that. Might have been wrong. Doesn't matter. But there are puzzles that were locked behind these quests, but because they were the first thing you did when you showed up at the island and you got the story of the area, it flowed together better versus with Fontaine or in Sumeru, where you enter in these zones and you're just left to dangle. If you don't do the Inara quests, Sumeru is a massive pain in the butt. If you don't do the Jin quest, the desert is a massive pain in the butt. If you go to Fontaine and you don't do a number of the little sheep people quests, it's just pain. They locked story content and exploration content behind quests, but they didn't. And maybe it's a flagging issue. Maybe it's something to where if they'd flagged it better, I wouldn't have these complaints or something similar. But at least at the moment, it feels we're in that scene in Matilda. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. That old children's movie where they force the kid to eat the cake, the giant chocolate cake. That metaphor just got away from me, but doesn't matter. They're shoving too much in, and they're not really giving you the guide rails to navigate all of this in a convenient and accessible manner. So yeah, that's one of the bigger complaints I have. I do also want to bring up the oculi. So the anemiculuses, the geoculuses, the electroculuses,
Yeah, the
that
statue of the seven currencies. Yeah.
yeah. And I know that both myself and you, Dave, we've got all of the currencies for the statues of at least Mondstadt and Liyue for obvious reasons. For those of you who don't know, those two statues, the currency for those two statues helps max out your stamina bar. From basically those two zones forward, there is no reason to grab those except for the primo gems that they give, which primo gems are not nothing. I'm not saying that those are nothing, but I'm really left wishing that something was given as well, that you got something else for doing those, even if it's just like a lesser stamina reward. Like if you get all of them, you get a fifth of what you would have gotten if you had completed Liyue and Mondstadt something stamina bar wise, or I don't know. Again, I'm not a game designer, but as it is, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't grab all the Dendro ones. I'm really unmotivated to grab the ones for Fontaine, the Hydro ones. It's just a checkbox that I'm not really heavily motivated to do, even with the items available to make.
I think I've maxed out, yeah, Mondstadt, Leo, and Inazuma. And then for these other two, and then I did the Dragon Spine equivalent at the other red tree. But for Sumeru and Fontaine, I'm at whatever the level I think below max is. So I'm on that last tier and finding those.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree with you in regards to, yeah, we had the first two zones, you're incentivized because you want more stamina so you can run farther, swim farther, or climb higher. And the last ones, yeah, aside from keys of the depths and the various primo gems and stuff that comes with that, it's a checkbox essentially for, yeah, the extra primos that you get. And going back to something you said a little earlier too about how things were released, because as far as like Inazuma, you mentioned, yeah, each island was released as its own. So there's what, like 5 or 6 islands, and when that patch first dropped and that zone was first introduced to us, we got what, 2 islands? We got Narukami Island, and then we got Kanazuka, and then maybe one more, and then each subsequent little mini patch after that added a new island. We got Sarai Island, or then we got Watatsumi Island, and then lastly Surumi Island, right? But with Sumeru, when that launched, right, leading up to it, we got the Chasm and Konoimiya. And then Sumeru dropped, and we got all of these new zones that are, yeah, like you said, all melded much together. So that's Lakapala Jungle, Avidia Forests, Ardravi Valley, Ashavan Realm, Anorana, the Lost Nursery, Visidua Field. And then after that, we got the whole desert area, which are multiple zones in and of itself, which I won't list out. But getting all those and, like you said, them blending together, I see where you're coming from, because there's not a quest to walk you through. Like when you enter, you don't pick up a quest immediately that walks you through the zone. It's, you have to go out of your way a little bit to find it. Whereas I think with Inazuma, it was more, okay, here it is. We do recommend you do it, but you don't have to do it type thing.
Yeah. And you weren't. I feel like that's a yes and no because of the way the patches were set up. As soon as you logged in, you were typically pointed towards the new quest for you to go off and do, because you were still playing through the story of the patch for the most part. So each new island, if you wanted to go to the island, you had to reach a certain point in that quest chain. So you're already preloaded to a certain degree to do that content. And then once you're on the island, you could technically ignore the story and go off and do other stuff. But usually doing the quest itself would, again, walk you around the island. The big one that comes to mind for me is the Ghost Island. I believe it was the S Island. The one with the mist.
Talking about Sarai Island?
Sarai Island. That island, I believe, was the Mist Island, where there were certain areas that you really had to complete the story in order to make them navigatable and playable.
Oh, no, that was Surumi Island.
Surumi. It's been 2 years at this point.
It's been over a year since that was. Yeah, that's fair. But.
Yeah, it's been a bit, but playing through those islands, they walked you through it. Unlocking those zones didn't feel quite as artificial because as long as you were playing through the story of the island, you were hitting them in a fairly natural way. And even if you were exploring, if you explored into the mist on Surumi Island, you'd get teleported out and you'd be like, oh, hey, you went into the mist, Zelda reference, you got lost and, came out. You knew that you were going to be able to go there eventually, though, because the story was leading you there. Like, you'd get there. And again, you knew what to do to eventually get that taken care of. It's play through the island's main story quest. You didn't run into a situation where you're going up to these giant pyramids and you've got no idea what it is that you have to do in order to get into them or activate stuff or get into this underground that apparently you have to get into. And that's content that you've got no. You're exploring some tunnels, then you hit a wall, and it's just a wall.
And we'd be conditioned to this point to be
Yeah.
like, oh, the puzzle trigger must be somewhere nearby, not, oh, it's a world quest I have to go run and do 3 chapters of to get an item in order to do this.
Yeah, and it's not. There are actually 3 world quests that you have to do because it's actually part of this quest chain, not this other quest chain that you're supposed to be doing because there's multiple of them in the zone. Yeah. And I guess building off of that, it's the fact that every zone is a collectathon. Every zone is its own Banjo Kazooie, Mario 64, Jack and Daxter, insert late 90s, early aughts platformer here.
Chris Bad for a day, yeah.
Yeah. It's those collectathons in each zone. The chasm, collect crystals in order to get more light. The mountain, I can't believe I completely blanked on Mondstadt's mountain.
Dragon Spine?
Dragon Spine, get the bloodstones. Inicomiya, get the shards of light, I believe is what it was for those. Like, every zone is a collectible of some assortment. For the larger, like, full regions, get the sigils, get the oculuses of whatever type that the region is associated with.
And as rewards for getting those, then you get keys of the depths. Go find those treasure troves and use the keys on those.
Yeah, and in order to even get the sigils, you have to go treasure chest hunting. And that's before we even get into, hey, in order to level this character, you need this sort of route, which I actually don't have a problem with the items in the world being used for leveling characters, but just the way all of the systems are tied together, you're left with this, or at least for me, I'm getting a level of fatigue around constantly feeling like I need to 100% a Mario 64, a Banjo-Kazooie, a Conker's Bad Fur Day. I'm not a completionist in that sense. I did 100%. I've got all 120 stars for Mario. I got all of the precursor orbs for Jack and Daxter. I've done it before, but that was not something I did on my first run of the game. It wasn't even really something I did on my second runs. That tends to be something I do on a fourth, a fifth, a much later run when I've already very much so mastered that game. And it is not a task that I find enjoyable. I do not find looking up a guide or sitting with a map open on my other screen, checking stuff off as I spend hours and hours just basically doing chores. It's not fun for me.
I do get what you're saying, and I know for me, being somebody who is a completionist, somebody who does want to do that, and I think on top of live events, so that was part of Super, but the other part I think of it was also the accessibility to some of these things. I'm looking at my map now. I still have some domains in the desert that I haven't even opened up. The Garden of Endless Pillars, I still haven't even opened that one up. Altar of Mirages, I can't even pronounce that. The Fane of Punjabi, I think, haven't opened that, or the City of the Deceased. I haven't unlocked those yet, which is a healthy bit.
Yeah,
of
I had a
content
question.
somewhere.
Did you even fight any of the bosses out there? The snake or the dragon or whatever it was, that the weekly boss.
Oh, as far as there's the Dendro hypostasis out there. There's the algorithm of the semi-intransient matrix of Overseer network. Ooh, that's a mouthful. So like those types of bosses, I did specifically for Nahida for characters on the Dendro hydrostasis. I did farm some of the other bosses in there just because the algorithm of the semi-intransient matrix of the Overseer network, that was an easy boss that I could knock out in less than 30 seconds, and you teleport close to it. So that I did that one. I fought everything at least once, I think, for like, achievement purposes and like, to check the box. But
Okay.
as far as yeah, farming or grinding those zones, not really. Now I still have, I think, a few world quests in my journal that I haven't completed, and those may unlock then more world quests that I haven't done to get some of those other spots. So like I still have dual evidence, I still have the Hymn of Tyriazad, I have Dune and Tome Fecundity Part 1, which are all Sumeru quests,
Mhm.
which I'm gonna have to go back and do it at some point in time. And again, I'm a completionist, so I need to do those. I just it was like at the time I didn't really have time. And the other thing I would like to see if there was something that's constructive criticism that I think is realistic for Hoyoverse to do. So the percentages are great. I can appreciate those. Lets me know about how much I have. The small issue I have is in Mondstadt, Highland, I have 100%. However, when I've had 100%, I've still found a common chest because 99.6 rounds to 100 in their system, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
oh, you're 100%, but you're still chests and maybe a puzzle or two that you're missing. So I would like to see if they could. I don't know how you want to break it down by region or by zone specifically. Like, how many chests are you missing? How many puzzles have you not done? I think that would be really helpful to truly 100% it. And I think that could be a realistic thing that you could implement. It may be a tedious thing to implement because then you actually have to go in and count like how many chests you've put in the world and how many puzzles. And if so, like I said, I'm not a game designer
Mhm.
or programmer, but I feel like that would help the completionist in me immensely rather than being overwhelmed or thinking I missed something. Because how I typically explore a new region, I go out, maybe I'm doing a daily commission or I'm doing a quest, and if I see a chest, I go to it. And then if I don't see anything else, I go back to the pathing to the quest that I was on. Or if I see another puzzle or another challenge or another chest, then I just go to that. And then that can like bunny trail me like
Mhm.
way out of my way. And then in Sumeru, that's where I was punished for not following and getting those quest items because I was coming upon things that I didn't have access to yet. Whereas when I was doing that in Mondstadt, it's oh, I just don't have that element in my team. Here, let me swap in Amber real quick because she was at the time the only fire bow user that was available. So that's I think also part of it as well. And that's just again that's just how I explore. How other people explore may be a little bit different, but that for me would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to. I actually stopped doing that in Fontaine because after Sumeru, I felt like I was being punished for it. I would actually explicitly leave hydroculus and other things in the world because I knew when it came time to try and hoover stuff up, it would be a massive pain in my butt to have 100 and I don't know how many hydroculuses they are. If there's out of 80, when you're sitting at 70 out of 80 and you only have 10 left, trying to go through all of them and check them off the list is a pain. Now, they do have items, to be fair, and for
Mhm.
those of you in the
Yeah,
audience.
compasses and yeah.
Yeah, they do have items that help narrow those down, but they, in my opinion, they're a little too expensive for what they do. It's
I just
very,
like a less than 30-second cooldown when it points you in the direction of a chest. That'd be great.
yeah, they
Or
have,
that's for the chest stuff. For the
yeah,
Dracula's finding ones, those are craftable. So it's oh yeah, more mats to farm.
yeah, and that's the other half of it is that if you want to get them in numbers that are useful, if you're not looking to just round off the last two or three that you need, I find that they're just it becomes a you have to spend 2 or 3 days to a week to longer depending on if you remember to do it grinding out and getting all those materials because they tend to require region specific mats and they tend to be on the rarer side of those mats. They're not easy, they're not quick easy, hey, I'm going to pop over here and just grind this out real quick. It's a you're going to be spending a couple days getting them together so that you can get the 5, 10, however many you need in order to finish it out. And I say that because that's what happened to me in Inazuma. That's the problem I ran into in Sumeru. And with the multi-level maps, it only makes it worse because it just tells you where a general area on the map. They don't tell you, hey, this Oculus that you're looking for is gated behind a quest or gated behind a
Yeah,
puzzle that you haven't
it'll,
done
it'll
over
give you
here.
elevation if you're close. It'll tell you oh it's
Yeah,
above you or below you. But yeah, you don't know if above you or below you is gated by something. Yes, to your point.
exactly. And again, I know that some of this is complaining and more to my overall concern or issue with exploration as content is that it's one time. It is content that you can only ever do once, and as soon as somebody releases a guide, that content becomes somewhat trivial. As someone who has played through Persona games with a guide, it is the most miserable thing that you will ever do. If you try and do a Breath of the Wild playthrough with a guide telling you where all of the different stuff is, where you need to go in order to try and 100% it, I promise you it is miserable. Exploration is one of those things that if you're doing it naturally, it comes great. But when you start enforcing 100% requirements on it, or you start making it so that you're required to get those 100%, and a lot of people are going to default to guides, it becomes, at least for me, miserable to do, a pain in the butt, and I think the biggest sin of all is it's something that isn't repeatable. You do it once, you're done, and now all of that development time that you've spent on it, basically it's pointless. You've wasted somebody's afternoon. Whereas a focus on more repeatable content, I think, would give them more value for the game and for the players. That's the crux of all of this. This is what all of it was leading towards, is that I enjoy exploration as content. I don't think it's something that they need to remove from the game. I'm not saying that they need to go to a Honkai Star Rail corridor style setup, but I do think that they need to really consider how much value their player base is actually getting from all of the exploration content that they have created. And yeah, that's the crux of it. Dave, do you think I'm wrong? Am I?
I definitely I see where you're coming from. Yeah, I agree with you on I think a lot of it in the overarching themes. If I had to summarize and closing thoughts on it, like you said, yeah, ultimately we do like exploration as content. For me, like I said, it was a draw to me with Genshin. It was part of the reason I was excited to get into this game because I wanted to explore this vast, beautiful world they've created. Get into the high peaks in Liwa or exploring the islands in Inazuma and also the music that comes with these different zones, which is also beautifully orchestrated. Anyway, but in these newer zones, while all that is still there, again, it's to some effect, some of the exploration feels like you're being punished for exploring and doing it at your own pace, whereas in older zones, maybe you weren't. Because you mentioned Breath of the Wild, other games that are open world games, things like The Witcher 3, or even going into those Bethesda games like Skyrim, you're not punished for exploring or going. Oftentimes you're rewarded. Taking Skyrim as an example, you come across a random cavern that has no quest marker to it, but you go in it, you find maybe some scrolls or magical items or something, you gain some valuable experience, you come out. You're only really punished if you jump into a dungeon that is a much higher level than you are, right, in the zone, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you can usually get out of those, or at least you die, you reset, whatever have you, and you're fine. But you're not, and then, right, hey, I'll mark this, come back to it at a future level, right? You're not punished in those games for exploring the open world that has been created for you to explore. Now, to your point, as far as, yeah, it's ultimately it's content that you can only do once and then check, it's done, right? Or yeah, once a guide trip is created, then it trivializes it. Yeah, that's a completely valid point. As someone who is actually currently playing through Persona 3 Reload, I'm following a 100% guide. I've just because I want to get everything done in one playthrough. And if I hadn't played Persona 3 already, and then Persona 3 FES when that came out with the expansion for the answer, playing those games through the first time, yeah, I played those without guides. How guides weren't really even a thing when I was playing those to age myself, but they were very enjoyable. And now I'm playing through following the guide, but that's because I have played it and experienced it and enjoyed it. And I want to experience it in to some extent for that nostalgia purposes. And so following the guide to 100% everything, while I wouldn't say it's, I wouldn't put it as negative as you did, I see where you're coming from and how people would think that in that regards. Those are my thoughts in that. And I know I need to go back to Sumeru and really dive in there and get that exploration going.
Yeah. And again, I know that I probably have come off very negative. I do want to be clear again. I do enjoy Genshin. I do enjoy the exploration. One of the best moments in the game is standing in the peaks around Liwa and just taking in the atmosphere. All of that is amazing. I'm hitting my Popeye moment. I've had all I can stand. I'm not sure I can stand much more.
Yeah,
When it
and
comes
and
to
all this Yeah, all this comes from a place of love for the game. We want to see it be successful and continue to grow and encourage other people to try it out, of course, if they haven't experienced it. Because if you are a gamer, even if you don't like gacha games, I think you can at least try it out and appreciate a lot of the effort and the love that does go into Hoyoverse games. And so everything that we're saying here is it's coming from a place of because we want it to continue to be good. We want to continue to have people come and try it out. We don't want people to be unhappy and leave the game because then that's how games ultimately get EOS'd, right? And we don't want that for something that we care about and enjoy so much. Now, speaking of gotcha games, I know that you tried out a couple of new games. So, Steve, I wanted to get into those games, or I don't know if it was one game or multiple games that you tried out. What have you been playing this past week? What'd you give a go?
So, the first game that I played this last week was Reverse 1999. I gave that game a shot. It's not bad as a gotcha go, or as far as gotcha games go. It was okay. It oozed style. I will say that the biggest selling point for Reverse 1999 is that it oozes style. It feels very 1950s, 1960s, maybe a little 1970s, all of which are decades before I was born, England. That's the tone of the game. It feels like a British James Bond type.
Noir type.
Yeah, a little bit of noir, a little bit of Lovecraft. I think back to it feels Cold War era, I think is the best way to put it. It feels like it is set during a Cold War. It's very good. I don't think I will continue playing it, not because it is bad, but just because it failed unfortunately to capture me. I don't see myself playing it for very long, but I do think it has an audience. I think it's definitely worth giving a shot, and if it resonates with you, I hope you enjoy it. For me personally, as much as I love the setting and so on and so forth, it's basically a card battler. You draw abilities every turn, and then you use them, and then you get ults, which isn't a bad system. It just didn't click with me. The next game I tried was Azure Lane, and I've played Azure Lane a little bit before, and I consistently bounce off of it. This time was no exception. There's something about the game that doesn't click with me. Similar to Arknights, I've tried multiple times to get into it, to give it a shot, and I just can't. I can't break through with that wall between it and me. I know that you've played it some, Dave. How did you break through the
Yeah,
first 20 minutes, let's say?
I remember Azure Lane when it originally came out, and I played it for a little bit, and then I dropped it. So I was like, man, there's not really too much to this. It's I don't know, I don't understand. I don't get this. There's not really any strategy to it. It's basically a ship waifu collecting game, and then I dropped it for probably about 3 years, 3 or 4 years or something like that. And then I picked it back up and still somehow had the same account on my phone. I guess I bound it to something, so I still had the same progress, which was nice. But when I came back to it, my mindset is it changed in my approach to it. So I wasn't looking at it anymore from a perspective of a gotcha game that you're trying to beat and trying to progress. It was literally this is my shut off my brain, just mindless auto battle, collect and level up your ship and your waifus, and where I have appeal or fun for it right now is trying to make the coolest or best fleet for each faction type thing. It really scratches the itch of if I ever just want to pull and not worry about blowing currency just because you get a lot of it and
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to worry about meta or anything per se, right? It scratches that itch. So if I ever need to pull in something, but all my other gotchas I'm saving for, I can just go in there and do a 10 pull and then boom. Like right now, there's an event going on for a new UR rarity ship, which is the highest rarity. And so that's where I do that. Plus, just did their Lunar New Year event. So we got some, when they give out their premium currency, their diamonds, they don't do it very often, but when they do, it's nice because then you can save up for nice skins or you can expand how many ships you can have in your dock type thing if you
Sure.
want to try and collect them all. Pokemon a little bit, but instead of fighting monsters, it's cute anime girls that are like boats. So yeah, so because I changed my mind perspective and my approach to it, and it scratches the I'd like to pull just to pull and hit that dopamine hit, but not screw up one of my accounts. That's what it's there for. So yeah, that's why I'm still playing that. But similar to I think what you experienced, that was my first go around. But I've eventually come back to it. Just have it there as a nice. It's just a mood. That's all it is. But what else have you tried? Did you give anything else a go?
Yeah, last game that I gave a try this week was Blue Archive, and that one was an experience because I spent a good hour before I got to the main menu because they have to get you through the prologue and so forth, and they don't let you skip. So I left it on auto, and it took a bit. I actually did that while making dinner. Had Blue Archive going in the background. So it probably took a little bit longer than it necessarily had to, but it took a bit. And I think it's really the aesthetic that didn't land with me. I know that they gave you like a free tin pool. I managed to get two 3-star characters, which I believe is the highest rarity. I might be wrong. I don't know.
That you can pull, yes, and then you have
Yeah.
to ultimately star them up to a higher rarity. But yes,
Okay. So I got two of those after doing my 10 retries in there. But I think I ran into a similar problem as what I ran into with Azure Lane, where it was an auto battle for me at least. It was an auto battler that didn't really manage to scratch a particular itch. It might have been the chibi art style. I'm not
hmm
necessarily against that art style. I think it can work, but that plus the schoolgirl type setup, and you know what, I'm going to be 100% honest. I think the one what really put me off on both Azure Lane and Blue Archive is I absolutely loathe when they force you to click the button in order to proceed as the tutorial, where they take away all control and they just go, we need you to hit this button. Okay, now hit this button. Okay, hit this button. I hate it. I absolutely hate it when they do that style tutorial. Let me click around, or at the bare minimum, if you don't want me to access something, gray it out, lock it down. That's fine. I get it. But don't force me to only click the one thing you want me to click on the screen. At that point, just do what it is. Just automatically play a little video of somebody clicking it and moving through instead of grabbing my wrist and forcing me to jump through these hoops like I'm a dog or a small child. It annoys me. It annoys me so much. So yeah,
yeah, the hand-holdy tutorials. You're not a fan of those. You just want to be free.
yeah, and even if you only just gave me one option, or you just put a little glow effect on it, but you let me click around, you let me click into my profile and check out that, or click into other options, or whatever. Just don't. I don't know. Admittedly they make these tutorials for gotcha gamers, so I understand they have to be low. Like they have to assume that they're talking to the lowest denominator, but it annoys me. But I know that you've been playing Blue Archive recently. How's that gone for you?
Yeah, so for me, Blue Archive, I've had an on again, off again relationship with for a long time. I played it when it launched, and then I dropped it because I think I got very salty about polls and doing because when it launched, they weren't as generous with the percentage on
Mm-hmm.
getting those 3-star units, and their pity system, while still not, I would say, great, was I think even worse at launch. Now they made some adjustments over the years to make it more user friendly. He says in air quotes because at the end of the day, it's a gotcha game. But and then I've come back to it, and I literally because sometimes they'll do events. I think the event that got me back one time was it was literally here's an event, log in every day for 10 free polls, and you'll have 100 free polls. And I just logged in the last day of the event, so I had 100 free polls. And I did the 100 free polls, and I said, all right, if I hit two 3-star units, I'm staying. And I didn't, so I uninstalled it. And then I came back to it recently, I think with a similar event to that. And I was looking for something else to do on my phone
Mm-hmm.
because Epic 7, I'm at a point where I can only really play that so much before I get tired because how much can I really optimize gear in that type of game, right? Similar to artifacts and Genshin
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how they do their gear in Epic 7, like how much can I really grind this? And so currently playing it now, I will say that the grind to do dailies is very quick. There's you skip Once you've cleared something and three-starred it, you can just spend the energy and immediately do it, and you can do it for multiple runs immediately. No
Okay.
skip tickets required. It'll just do it, which is a very nice quality of life that I wish more gotchas did. You can skip the PvP battles if you're interested in climbing PvP, or even if you just want to do your one PvP fight for your daily checkbox. I'm currently in a I'm saving gems up to find somebody that maybe fits a team or somebody whose aesthetic I like. Something that I don't really love about it is the how long it takes to like unlock things. And what I mean by that is there's three gear slots. There's like a weapon, armor, and an accessory. And you can't equip an accessory on somebody until you hit level 15, or you can't get the upgrade materials for any of these because they start all at tier one, right? These equipment pieces, and you can't
Hmm.
upgrade them to tier two until you clear something in the main story chapter, which requires you to be at whatever level. And then you
Okay.
can't get to tier three stuff until you unlock things that are in chapter 7 or 8, which require you to be like level 43, 44, or 45, which can take some time to get to because you're
Hmm.
restricted to leveling up based off of how much energy you have.
Yeah.
It just feels a little slow in that regards. Now, luckily for me, it's a side game. It's not a game I'm trying to grind out seriously, so I don't care. But something I do like and can appreciate is like their affection system and the ability to get the shards to rank to like so every unit can get to 5 or 6 stars or whatever the cap is, even 1 star units. So it's
Hmm.
one of those games where 1 star units can become viable. And aside from pulling, so obviously if you pull a character, you get their shards, but when you get duplicates, you also get these other material that you can go spend in the shop to buy more shards of a specific character. So there's that way to do it. And then you can also get shards by like a few, like you have like 5 daily interactions you can do. They're called lessons to keep with the school theme because that's the whole realm you're in is you're the teacher and these are all your students. And so you go do lessons with some of the students and you have a chance to get a random shard and you increase their infection level. And I do appreciate the affection levels gaining passive stats, and also you'll unlock different lobby screens once you reach certain affection levels, which anything that does something like that and rewards you, even though it's very minor and it's purely cosmetic, I can always appreciate that. So if it was trying to be my main game, I probably would have dropped it. But because I'm treating it as a side game, I'm not getting burned out or frustrated with it, and I have the patience on the banners to wait for units that look cool or are meta.
Okay. Speaking of characters that look cool or are meta, I know that you've been doing some Nikkei pools as well.
Yes, Nikkei this week launched a new character. I say new character, but it's a an alternate version of a character. So what I mean by that is its own independent character, but it is a character that was previously released just in a different skin. So for
So like
this,
dill
I'm sorry, go
pickle.
ahead.
So it's like a dill pickle from Honkai.
Yes,
Inheritor
yeah, you
Lube.
referred to him as Dill Pickle, threw me
Yeah.
off. But yeah, so Don Hung, yeah.
Yeah.
The new character that they released is D Killer Wife, and she looks a lot like Yor from Spy Family. So there's all those memes going on the Reddit, which are pretty humorous. And the faction she's a part of is the Elysian faction, which is one of the main factions in the game. And she's a burst one unit with a 20-second cooldown, and she's one of her abilities reduces the cooldown on your burst timer. So in terms of getting that rotation going quicker, it's very useful. And she's an Elysian unit, which is a manufacturer group that has been very limited in the amount of characters they have. So there's a game mode standard with every gacha that is tower mode, right? So you climb the tower each floor progressively harder. And in this game, they have your main tower, which you can use any units to form whatever team you want to go, and then they have the manufacturer towers. So like you can only use units from that particular manufacturer. And universally, the Elysian Tower is the tower that people have been struggling with the most because the units just aren't there.
Hmm.
She enables, I think, a little bit of a boost in power to those Elysian teams with the type of support she provides. Plus, she looks phenomenal. Now, something with this that I picked up on, and I know you dabble with Nikkei a little bit. I didn't know if you had seen it or whatever have you. So, in the current event that's going on that features this new character, when you go to her summon screen to go if you want to do a summon, it typically will do the standard. It shows you what she looks like when she's fighting in a stage. Then it shows you her burst or skill cutscene, and then it then transitions to her just doing her standing animation. So you get all three things, right?
Hmm.
So you get the inaction, the cutscene, and then the idle standing animation, like if she was in your lobby or you go to her character screen. But something I noticed during the inaction, so like she's fighting in a stage, at the very edge of the screen, there's another character there who makes an appearance in the event, and her name is Rosanna. And Rosanna's a character that came out a few months ago. She's a mob boss esque type character. She's a leader of lore wise, she's a leader of one of the underground groups anyway. But basically she's a mob boss
Hmm.
and she has that kind of appearance to her. In this event, or I should say in this event, she has a kind of different look. She has long hair and she's in this nice black dress, like going to a ball or an elegant type look. And in the summon animation for D, Rosanna appears at the very edge of the screen. You can see her for a split second in this black elegant dress, so it's not her default costume. So it makes me wonder, did we just get a leak and this is going to be a skin that's going to come out that we can buy in the near future? Or are they going to make an alternate version of Rosanna and she's going to be coming up in like the next patch? So I'm interested to see what they do with her because she looks great.
Yeah, I agree. I have unsuccessfully rolled for D Killer Wife. I'm going to be scrambling to try and scrape together enough pulls in order to maybe guarantee her. But if it's back to back, her and then Rosanna, it's going to be rough. My Nikkei
Yeah,
pulls are going to be in
because
trouble.
you are a collector in that game.
Yeah.
So you want to catch them all. For me in my polls, I wanted to pull her again because she strengthens my Elysian Tower team. Once I get her built up and I get the skill items so I can rank up her skills. So I was like, I got to get at least one copy of her. So I threw 10 pulls at her. Boom, 10 pull, got her. Now, Nikkei rates are a little better than Genshin and Star Rail, so I think it's about 4% chance. But still, boom, got her. And then I was like, you know what? I have all these tickets saved up. I had about 70 tickets saved up, and then I have about 50,000 diamonds saved up. And I was like, let me just use the tickets. I'm not going to crack into my gems because 70 tickets gave me enough to have enough of the dust saved up that I can go into the shop and just buy somebody that I like
Mm.
on the next banner if I miss them or whatever have you. I don't have to worry about pulling. I can just boot. So I was like, let me just pull 70 times and I'll have enough. So the second 10 pull, boom, got her again. So I was able to limit break her once.
Yeah.
Third pull, I got 9 SR units and then 1 R unit, which I was like, okay, no SSR, but the fact that 9 of them were the purple units,
Yeah.
okay, I don't hate this. That's good currency for that metal shop, right? Fourth 10 pull, I get her again. So I've gotten her 3 times. I was like, oh my goodness. The last 3 pulls or the last 3 10 pulls I did, one pull was literally all blue units. So we had to balance out in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
And then the sixth 10 pull and the seventh 10 pull, I did get an SSR, but they were not her. They were off banner SSRs, but they were off banner SSRs that one of which I used. So I got another
Hmm.
copy of Noir, which she's in my main team. She's part of the Bunny duo, which is
Yep.
currently kind of part of the meta build right now. And then I got my limit break 3 of Mast. So I unlocked Mast's lobby illustration, which she is the pirate Nikkei
Hmm.
and a lot of One Piece references in there. So she cracks me up, and I really like her burst screen. So she's now in my lobby. So my Nikkei pulls went really good. So 70 pulls, 5 SSRs, including 3 being on banner. So I was pretty happy. And then the 2 that weren't were Nikkeis that I used or Nikkeis that I really liked. So that's been my Nikkei experience. Now, something I had this past weekend that I want to throw in for fun here
Uh,
and get your
Sorry,
immediate
real
reaction.
before we do that, let's do a quick discussion on the new banner style in Genshin, and then we'll wrap up with.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. Let's talk about Genshin because they just did their live stream. But yeah, new banner. Tell us about it, Steve.
By the time this comes out, I'm sure everybody's going to have heard all of the hot takes on the new banner. But the long and the short of it is the way it works is there are, I believe, 6 characters that you will be able to choose which of those 6 you want to go for. You roll on the banner, it has the standard 50-50 on it. Only if you fail the 50-50, you'll get one of the other characters on the banner. For those of you who might have missed the live stream, the characters on this first version of the banner are Eula, Albedo, Luke, Klee, Mona, and Jean. Also, potentially choose a weapon off the banner. The weapons are It's a long list, so it's not really worth going too deep into them. Most of them are standard weapons. However, there are off standard banner weapons, which include Song of Broken Pines, as well as Tingyun's and the weapon for Deha's signature weapon.
Said Ting Yun, but this is for Genshin.
Yes, the Dindro bow user. I might have got his name wrong. The one whose voice actor had the controversy.
Oh, Tighnari.
Tanari, not Tingyun.
Ting Yun is that dead fox in Star Rail. Spoilers.
Yeah, true.
Look, if you're in Piconi, you've experienced that already, okay? Okay.
True. Regardless, you can choose from those weapons, and if you choose to go the weapon route, if you fail on the 50-50, it will default to one of the other weapons on the banner, and then next time you roll, you'll get it. The long and the short of it is that it, A, does not use standard banner.
It's going to be a third currency.
No, it uses the premium currency. It uses not irregular, whatever the currency that you use for.
So it's using the limited wishes, not the standard wishes. Oh.
Yeah, which is point number one that I have against it. Like, I understand. So, very much so of mixed feelings on this banner. One of the things that I like about it is that it is nice to be able to get older characters or characters that maybe haven't had a banner for a while. Just for clarity's sake, for the live stream, they mentioned that the only characters that will appear on this banner are characters that are either on the standard banner or who have already run 3 times, who've already had 3 appearances on a limited banner and haven't appeared for a while, which is why you're seeing Albedo and Eula and so forth, and Klee on there. I get it. I understand that Genshin we're getting up to a point to where there's so many characters that even with 2 banners, it's difficult to give everyone their time in the sun. At the same time, the fact that it uses the premium currency, the premium pool currency, really leaves me sitting here going, we're already in a situation where the standard banner pools are just so valueless. They're only further devaluing.
Yeah, if they just overhauled that as the standard banner, I think it would have been I think that would be a lot better received. But yeah, hearing it takes premium currency, unless that is just the right mix of units on a banner, I don't think I'd ever want to spend on it.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that there's been a lot of discussion around whether the weapon side of it is even worth it. Primarily because if you go to the weapon banner and you pull through the limited weapon banner that's already available, you technically can you will hit pity sooner than you will on this new banner. The problem is that the maximum on it is much higher. You have about I think it's 240 pools on the standard, and it is 160 on this new one for you to get it. The problem is,
because what it would be a 50-50 on this new reworked banner, but on the standard weapon banner, you have to go through the path twice to guarantee it that third time through. Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, so the situation where you and I got the weapons we didn't want is less likely to happen, but at the same time, if you're one of those people where going to 3 really doesn't matter to you, you'd rather have the option or the chance of, because it's not an option, it's just a chance of you getting it sooner, then you should go that route. You should go with the current banner. The other issue is that a lot of the weapons are going to be older.
Yeah, they're not going to be the new weapons. You're not going to see Navia's weapon there. We're not going to see Tighnari's weapon, or not Tighnari, any of the newer characters, Nuvolette, or any of those types of characters. Farina's on there.
Yeah. It's an interesting solution to a problem that at this point I feel like it's halfway there. The other kind of concern is that because it is going to be rotating, who's going to end up on it? There's a little bit of speculation that we could be going into a leeway version of it next, where you could see a hypothetical,
like a region banner. The banner features the different regions, units, and weapons. Interesting.
Yeah, and again, we are perhaps not the content creator for that sort of breakdown. I know that a number of other content creators have gone through it and given other thoughts on it. And yeah, I apologize. Give me 1 second.
I'd be more interested in it if it was either a new currency that was maybe easier to grind out than wishes, or if it just used, if they overhauled the standard banner and you use standard wishes. But yeah, using limited wishes, that again, it would have to be the right concoction of units to spend limited wishes on. So being like, hey, I picked the unit I really want, but maybe 3 of the other 5 units that are on the banner are units that I can live with if I lost the 50-50 type thing.
Yeah, I could definitely see myself going for this banner if, for example, I was looking to pick up Venti. I could see this as a potential way to pick up older characters to complete collections. I don't. Unfortunately, most of what I'm seeing on the list and most of what I'm seeing available, pulling for Eula at this stage of the game, not really worth it. Albedo is not a powerhouse character. Klee is well known to have issues, and then the other three are standard characters, which you'll get them eventually. You'd have to. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, but at this point, if you've been playing since 1.0 or Mondstadt in general, you're really statistically unlikely to have not gotten one copy of each of the standard characters. It's not impossible, but you should have some of them in your party at this point.
Yeah, and if you don't, you're not missing too much because they aren't or were not meta. Because Venti's not a standard banner character. He had his own limited because he was meta at early onset of the game, and then Kazuha did his job a little better, so Kazuha replaced him in that type of build. But yeah, like I said, I'll be interested to see more of it once it's implemented. But just from that, my initial knee-jerk reaction is that of ooh, limited wishes. But like I said, we'll see what they do with it, how often they implement it, and or how often they change it, and then ultimately how it's implemented.
Yeah. So, regardless, we've given a brief 2 cents on that. Circle back around to the
So,
previous.
so I wanted to get your thoughts on, and this is I'm throwing you a curveball. So this was something. It happened over this past weekend. I was at a social event, and the topic of video games came up, and I asked this individual. I asked her what I didn't. I asked her what her favorite genre of games were, and then what some of the franchises in that genre that she enjoyed were. Because it's too hard to ask somebody to pick their favorite game. There's just too many really good ones out there. It's like asking a musician to pick their favorite song. You just or a cinephile to pick their favorite movie. You just can't. It's hard. So I started with genre, and she said I love RPGs. RPG is probably my favorite genre, and games like Pokemon, Persona, and The Legend of Zelda. And I said, and my response to that, very calmly and very quickly, was, hey, those are all great gaming franchises. I appreciate that, but Legend of Zelda is not an RPG. And that turned into a discussion of why it is or is not an RPG, which, with obviously my stance, having just stated it, another individual pipes up who was listening to our conversation but wasn't actively involved. And their comment was along the lines of, they asked me to then define what is RPG, what does it stand for? And I was like, well, it's a role playing game. And this individual's argument to counter me said, well, okay, in Legend of Zelda, aren't you role playing as Link? And I said, yes, but by that logic, in Halo, I'm role playing as Master Chief, but Halo is not an RPG. And they're like, I was like, by your logic, Halo would be an RPG, but it's definitely not. And then this individual goes, Halo is an RPG. I was like, look, I appreciate you being logically consistent, but that is not correct.
Yeah.
And so I just immediately ignored that person for the rest of the
Yeah.
conversation and went back to the person I was originally engaged with in that, yeah. So my stance being Legend of Zelda is not an RPG. And she kept getting caught up on it. It's an open world RPG. I was like, no, it's an open world adventure game, or open world adventure action game, but it is not an RPG. And then for me, it's for an RPG to be in that kind of genre, there has to be some type of leveling mechanic in terms of like leveling up skill mechanic or the characters themselves leveling up. So things like obviously Final Fantasy, we've mentioned them earlier with Skyrim, Morrowind, stuff like this. And even in this conversation with this young woman, I brought up Genshin. I said, and along the same line, similar to Legends of Zelda, would be Genshin Impact, which would be an RPG. That is an open world RPG. It is also in the genre of a gacha game, but it is an RPG because it has those leveling elements. So while it is very similar to Breath of the Wild in a lot of aspects, Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda as a whole is not an RPG. And so we just had fun with that discussion, but it got me thinking, and I wanted to throw this out to you. So, Steve, would you, if you were a part of that conversation, would you have been on my side of the discussion, or would you have been on the side of this other individual? Or would you have been that third person?
No, no, I would not have been the third gentleman. Although that is an argument I have heard before. I agree, it doesn't quite work. Although it is a fallback position, I know why people take it.
Like I said, I appreciated
Yeah.
her logical consistency with saying that Halo was then ultimately a first, or was ultimately a role playing game. I was like,
Yeah.
no, it's first person shooter.
No,
Anyway,
I will say that Zelda is. I'm sure many people in our audience have seen the sort of alignment chart of stuff, like the taco alignment chart or the ice cream sandwich alignment chart, where it's function agnostic or function Puritan, whatever, doesn't matter. Where the aesthetic of something versus the actual building of something. To cut through all of that, I believe Zelda
yeah,
is
you lost me there, so let's bring it back.
yeah, to cut through all of that, Zelda is an action RPG, and here's my argument as for why.
Okay.
So you mentioned Skyrim. What stats do you level in Skyrim?
In Skyrim, you have your major and minor abilities themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You can choose from a preordained class, or you can custom build a class to choose those major
Okay.
skills and then the minor skills that you level up. And then
Mm-hmm.
upon actually leveling up enough of those major skills, then you actually level up upon resting, in which you then choose from core statistics to level up. So like your strength, stamina, and magicka or
Yes.
magic.
So those three stats are ones that you directly level up, correct?
Well, you directly level up all of them. You
Yes,
just
but
level up others by using them. But anyway,
the point is that when you level up, you gain either health, you gain stamina, or you gain magic. All three of those systems exist within the Legend of Zelda franchise. In Ocarina of Time, you get heart containers, which you then use to level up your health. You level up your magic by going to the Great Fairies and getting magic. In Breath of the Wild, you level up your stamina by getting the spheres or the orbs or whatever. You do level up your character in The Legend of Zelda. You do gain statistical strength and power. I will admit that there's not a skill system in there, but to be fair, I'm looking over at another ARPG, namely Dark Souls, Demon Souls, that family, and their level up system isn't. It's more complex, I will admit that, but your gear plays a large part of that, and your gear also plays a large part of your setup in Zelda. You get the hammer, you level up the Master Sword, or you get the Big Iron Sword, or Big Goron Sword. I would argue it's an ARPG based off of that. That you do level up statistics, you do increase power of your character.
So the heart container argument was brought up. That
Mm-hmm.
was one of her counterpoints to me, is
Mm-hmm.
that you level up your health. She didn't mention the magic fairies, and what I would say, and what I'll say that, and since you also specifically mentioned the magic fairies,
Mm-hmm.
is in a lot of the Zelda games, it's missable. It's not a core mechanic. It's missable. You have to do extra things to do it because sometimes you don't necessarily get to those great fairies to do the magic. In Link to the Past, you could
Mm-hmm.
after magic usage on things, but you had to find it. It was a secret. Heart containers. While you do get heart containers after defeating every major boss,
Mm-hmm.
the quarter heart containers you get you actively go out and find. But I would make the case that it's not a core aspect of the game. Because
I would disagree with that, but
you don't have to level up. You don't have to level up the hearts.
I
Like,
you also don't have to level up in most RPGs either. You could technically beat a
but it
number
is
of
a
them.
but it is what I'm getting at is it
I,
is a core mechanic because you just by actively playing the game, you are
mm-hmm.
gaining experience and leveling up whatever skills. Whereas in Zelda, by actively playing the game, I'm not leveling up my health unless I am actively looking for those heart containers.
So
That's more what I'm getting at.
I get it, but I feel like that's a little bit disingenuous because if you are actively going out and playing the game, you are beating bosses, which gets you the heart. It doesn't get you the quarter containers, but it does give you full levels. Which is how is that different than a main quest and a side quest? Quarter hearts are side quests. Main full containers are main quests. It's not a traditional XP system, but I would argue that you are leveling up your character following that route. That by playing the game, You are increasing your health, you're increasing your abilities. Now, you don't have to engage with all of them, but with most RPG systems, you don't necessarily have to engage with every aspect of leveling up your character.
True, you don't, but what I'm getting at is that leveling up mechanic is a core aspect of a traditional RPG. In The Legend of Zelda, the core mechanic is not leveling up your hearts, it's figuring out the puzzles and acquiring different items to your effect with the Kokiri sword and the Master Sword and the big Goron sword.
Okay, so what is the functional difference between leveling up a character and getting a new spell and completing a dungeon and completing a task and getting a new ability via a weapon? I feel like it's a skin difference there that, if you would have, I'll admit that there is not a explicit here's a number that you get that levels you up.
And that's the difference that I'm getting at.
Okay. I would disagree with that. Again, I would say it's definitely an ARPG. It's an action RPG. It is not a hard role-playing Baldur's Gate RPG. But I feel like it easily would fall within the ARPG category. It's definitely on the softer side. It's not, again, you're not number crunching nearly as much. But looking at...
But yeah.
No, I would say as much, because even with Breath of the Wild, you can get into really specific builds with armor. You can upgrade that armor. You can upgrade your weapons. Even in older versions, Ocarina of Time, you had a lot of items available. You had specific builds and setups that you could do. Again, they're not necessarily hyper complex, but you had options.
Like I said, I wanted to throw it out there as a for fun topic. Yeah. Maybe other folks have some insight or different arguments for either side. But yeah, just for me, it's an action adventure game. I wouldn't put it under RPG as I stated, but I think we can both see what the other argument and the other side is saying. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that curveball at you, get your thoughts, because it was something that came at me this weekend I thought would be fun. But I do want to thank everybody for joining us this week. Let us know what your thoughts are on exploration in the Hoyoverse games. Maybe you have some thoughts on some upcoming events or other gotchas that Steve and I should try out. If you did like this episode, be sure to follow and subscribe to the channel, or you can email us at brohoyo@gmail.com with questions or suggestions for the show. We will also have a link for our Discord in the description, so be sure to join us over there for more conversations and content notifications. Just as a reminder, I know we mentioned this last week, just as a reminder again, we will be taking a 2-week break from the podcast, but we're going to return for our second season, starting with a new episode on April 1st. That's not a joke. The episode will go out on that day. We will be posting other content on this channel in the interim, but again, no podcast for next Monday or the Monday after. The next new episode will be on April 1st. But thank you again for joining us for this, and we look forward to seeing you guys in a couple weeks.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate. No